March of 1983, he was on his front porch. Mom went in the house to get a coat for him because it was cold outside. He was waiting for his brother coming home from school. His brother was his hero, so that was kind of a daily thing for him. He was excited when his brother was coming home. And she went in to get a coat, came back out, and he was gone. Just absolutely disappeared. She was making cookies, waiting for her other son to come home. Went in to get a jacket, came out, and he was gone. He was just almost 3 years old. They do the initial kind of patrol response investigation. They set up a command post, detectives showed up. They did yard-to-yard search, house-to-house, abandoned buildings, cars, but they heavily concentrated on the canal and the creek that runs behind the apartment complex. They ran all leads down at that time, checked them all, and they had nothing. The department reopened the case as a cold case back in 2020. We have traveled across the country. We've interviewed 12 to 15 people, I believe, that were a part of this case, friends, family, tracked him down from 1983, and we've interviewed those folks. We've heavily looked at the canal theory of whether or not he went in the canal or not, and we've pretty much ruled that out. We're not going to take anything off the table, but we do believe that this was an abduction, kidnapping, just based on the fact of his age and the fact that very few people believe he went into the canal. The National Center for Missing and Exploited Children have reviewed this case. They've done, I think, 2 or 3 case reviews on it. I sent it out to a cold case detective who's retired now and has reviewed the case. An aquatics death expert has reviewed the case. I've gone back and talked to the water master and looked at the water flows, the temperature, the condition of the canals at that time. We've done extensive work. Again, traveled the country. We've talked to both parents. And now we're at a point, new technology, DNA, and genealogy. It's kind of one of our last hope efforts of someone who maybe believes they're involved in this case, might believe they're Jason, would upload their DNA into Jedmatch or contact us, and the state police will do a comparison. This is the only photo that we have of him, and you could see it's not great quality. So we're still working on that. We're trying to find other photos. We had just recently contacted the mom. She didn't have anything left of Jason. So we're kind of going back to square one of trying to find that age progression photo. I mean, obviously a positive outcome is what we all hope for, that he's alive, happy and healthy, and that we can reunite him with his biological family. The next best thing, as morbid as it sounds, is that we find his remains and provide closure to the family. Like I said, I've contacted, met with the mother, and it was pretty rough on her. So to bring closure after kind of reopening those wounds would be a success and what we hope for. Worst case scenario is that we just never solve it. Yeah. And what we're hoping is that people that lived in that immediate area, if they remember this case, that they would contact us, and we'll give a number here for them, because that's a piece of the puzzle that I'm missing in this case, of who was interviewed, what they saw, what they heard at that time. So we're really looking to speak with people that lived in that area and remember, have details about the case. The next thing is just to keep the case alive and out in the public, so that if someone has suspicions that maybe I'm Jason Cannon. I mean, as of 3 months ago, we got another lead from Nick Mick of someone that believed that they were Jason Cannon. So the leads are still coming in from across the country. At 3 years old, he probably has no clue, if he's still alive and someone took him and raised him as their own child without any genetic testing, they wouldn't know. It's an apartment complex, kind of in the north end, and you can see, if you go out there, you'll see there's a very narrow canal where you're like, okay, if a kid fell in there, he would float down. But if you go further down by Esther Simplot Park, you'll see the water. It slows down, it widens up. And in reading the police reports, the dive teams, the detectives all talked about how none of them believed that the body would have floated to the Boise River because of the slack water, the hang-ups, the snags. The stepdad even did some experiments floating, a small dummy down the river, and it got snagged. So most everybody, even contrary to some of what the media reports were back then, I don't think anybody that has real knowledge of the case believes that he went into the canal. No one lives there anymore. That's a part of the case. It's a fourplex apartment complex. No one there is a part of the case anymore. And I've actually gone down in March and walked most of that canal, not as a search, but just to familiarize myself, because when you read the report and you think, that's the first thing you think of, a small child in water, like they went into the water. And it would be easy for a detective to just go, oh, he went into the water, write it off and close the case. But I went and walked along that entire canal bank and looked at what they were describing in the police reports, and it makes sense. It's like, it's shallow. Now the water was flowing pretty good back then, but even then you look at the growth and how slow the water moves. And according to the police reports, they searched that canal really quickly, because it's directly behind the house. There was a big chain link fence that went around it. We have information that he was afraid of water. He loved, his highlight of the day was when his brother coming home from school and mom had brownies in the oven. What 3-year-old kid just wanders off during that time? So if he didn't go in the canal, a 3-year-old doesn't just walk off and raise themselves. So that's why we strongly believe that this was an abduction or kidnapping. Now, who did it and what their motives are, we don't know. In this, obviously, everyone cares about kids. Whenever there's a kid that's hurt or missing, everyone comes together. And so to be able to be a lead detective in a cold case like this, that hope that he's still alive, he's happy, he's healthy, and you can reunite him with his biological family is what drives us. But case does keep you up at night. It's even talking to some of the old detectives that remember the case, it still bothers them. And the case keeps me up at night thinking about where he is, who took him, what their motives were, if he's still alive, and how we can bring closure to the parents. So like the 12 to 15 people that we tracked down, it took a little bit to spark their memory, but you got to think a missing kid is not something that you really forget about, so that's going to be stuck in your mind. So in speaking with them, you're like, hey, do you remember this case? You live here? And they're like, oh yeah, I remember that, and this is what happened. They think about it, maybe you talk to them a day or two later. But that is our hope. That is a piece of the puzzle that we're missing, is we'd really like to speak with people who lived in that immediate area and have something knowledge about the case. The next thing is, if you believe you're Jason, we can do genetic testing. Our state police will do comparisons. Or if your DNA is in a company's DNA system or database, upload that into Jedmatch, because we're going to have an account associated with this case that we can look and see if you are Jason Cannon or not. So we just started the DNA process. So we're waiting for the results to come back and start doing the genealogical searches. But there really is, we don't have anything of Jason's that we could get DNA off of. And that would actually fill in that void. But it's at this point, it's a waiting game of if his DNA pops up as a live sample or if remains are found. So the mom's DNA is in NamUs, which is a missing persons database. So if someone's digging up in their backyard or a new house, something, and remains are discovered, that DNA gets put into the missing persons database and we would have a match. Best case scenario is that he's alive, him or his children put their DNA in a system. But what's interesting though is that most of those companies don't talk to each other. So mom's DNA could be in family tree DNA. Jason or his children could have put their DNA in Ancestry or 23andMe. Those two companies don't talk. So that's why we encourage them to upload into Jedmatch, because Jedmatch is kind of a clearinghouse, or you can voluntarily put all of your DNA profile into Jedmatch, and it will talk to all those companies that people have voluntarily put it in. You basically just go into your account and you upload that to Jedmatch, and you can check. And what's important is you need to check that that gives law enforcement permission, because there's some privacy rights that these companies have. So you have to check that I agree and allow law enforcement to look into my DNA. ISP will do a one-for-one comparison with the mom's DNA. And it's just that comparison, that testing. So they're not going to run, if you submit your DNA thinking, hey, I might be Jason, ISP is not going to run that against criminal database. They're not going to search for unsolved crimes. It is just a one-for-one comparison, and then that sample gets destroyed. So we want to offer some assurance to people. If they submit their DNA thinking they're Jason, that the state lab isn't going to do a free-for-all carte blanche search through all CODIS and all the DNA criminal databases. We just want to offer people some assurances, because not everyone likes to give their DNA to the cops. So we want to offer them some assurances that this is just for looking for Jason. It's not going to be used for, searching across the country. But I think the big thing here is that the Boise Police doesn't give up, and we are going to work this case and continue working this case. As long as there's leads to follow, we're going to follow up and keep this case alive. And hopefully with the media's interest, that people across the country see this. If they have suspicions, any knowledge whatsoever, that we're looking to speak with you and get that information. And we're going to follow up on any lead that comes in.